All right, welcome everyone. This particular podcast is on factoring. So we're going to be factoring quadratics and we're going to go through several different rules for factoring. The first one that we're going to be working on is factoring with a GCF. In other words, factoring out a greatest common factor. You should remember this from when you worked in Algebra 1. And it was kind of the first thing we did. And when you did fractions back in elementary school, you would have done that. So what we're going to do is, what we're doing with the greatest common factor is we're pulling out a common term. In other words, what do they have in common? Now, some of you will be able to look at these and just tell me what's being factored out, and that's great. Others of you might struggle, so I'll show you another little method for doing that, and then hopefully that'll help everybody do well on the factoring unit and help you remember what you were supposed to be doing. So when we're factoring out a greatest common factor, what we want to look in is what do they have in common. So for example 1, we are going to factor 3a squared minus 12a. All right. Now, traditionally, most of you can just look and tell what we're factoring out. Your answer is going to be 3a, and then that's going to be a minus 4. All right, and so that's factored. Here is another way to look at that. And so what we're going to do is we're going to separate it out. And I always pull my negative. If it's not positive, I automatically pull that in so that way I can remember that, because sometimes you're factoring out a negative term. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to break these up into factors. Now, for those of you who haven't checked on my School Fusion page, there is a table that's called a table of squares and square roots. You are more than welcome to print that out and use that as a resource as long as you write nothing on it. This will be especially helpful if you don't know your factors or if you don't use a calculator. That might help you out a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break up 3a squared into 3 times a times a. Now I'm going to break this up into negative 4 times 3 times a. All right, and so if you notice, if you do 3 times a, that's 3a squared. And then negative 4 times 3 times a is a negative 12a. So now what I want to do, and I'm going to use a different color, I want to circle what's in common in both the first line and the second, so in each of the terms. And so I see that this is in common, and also this is in common. It doesn't matter which one I circle. All right. When I do that, what comes out front, or this 3a, if you notice, it's what's circled. And you only do it once, so you don't do 9a squared, it's 3a. It's how many times is it circled, not what's in the circles. And so then you're going to have 3a, and then what you do with the parentheses is you write what's left. Now keep in mind that if you start with 2 terms, in your parentheses you need to end with 2 terms. And so what's left in the first line is a, and then what's left in the second line is that minus 4. And so notice I have the same answer that I got here, just a little bit different way of looking at it, and that might help you if you break it into something smaller. Now, if you want to check to see if this is correct, you can just multiply or use the box. I'll use the box because most of you seem to like that. Yeah, okay, we're going to do 3a and then a minus 4. Why I like the box? Different sizes, it doesn't matter. So then 3a times a is 3a squared, and then 3a times minus 4 is a negative 12a. So you have 3a squared minus 12a. And you notice I got what I started off with. Okay? So let's do another one. We're just going to go to a different page. And let's call this example 2. And we are going to factor 5x squared plus 15x. I'm going to do the same thing. If you can look at it again, if you can look at it and tell, I'm perfectly happy with that. But I'm going to break this up into 5x squared, and then I'm going to do 15x. Again, I only write the sign if it's not a positive. And so when I break this up, I'm going to have 5 times x, and then here I'm going to have 5 times 3 times x. The reason I write it that way is so that way when I circle it's lined up. Not all the time, but a lot of times that does help. So now I'm going to circle what's in common. So I have that, the 5, and I have the x. So now when I go to write my answer, I have 5. Oops, come on. Why is it not writing? Did I do something? I'm not sure, guys, why my pen is not writing. Let's try this. Okay, let me pause this for just a minute. Alright, I got that problem fixed. Sorry about that. And so that's 5x, and then what's left is what goes in the parentheses. So you're going to look at x plus 3. The reason that it's a plus, there's no sign in front of it. There's no negative, so I know it's plus. Okay, let's do another one. Let's factor, oh, this one's good. 9p squared minus 3pq. Okay, so again, we're going to do 9p squared and then negative 3pq. When I write that out, I'm going to have 3 times p times p. And then this is going to be negative 3 times p times q. And let's circle what we have in common. So we have a 3, but notice I'm not circling the negative because it's not in common with both. And then we have the p's. And then let's go ahead and write our answer. So what we circled was 3p, and then what's in common, you have 3p minus q. And there you go. Now I'd like to do a couple more that are maybe a little more challenging. And so let's go to a different page. And where were we, I think? Example 3. Okay, we're on example 4, sorry. And so example 4, we're going to factor, and I thought this one was pretty neat. 3x times 4x plus 5 minus 5 times 4x plus 5. Now I'll be honest, when you're factoring out a greatest common factor, when there are parentheses and the parentheses are the same, it's real easy. So if you notice what's in common, sorry about that, is the parentheses. So I'm going to take 4x plus 5 out. And when you do that, what's left? Well, that's the other parentheses, 3x minus 5. This will definitely come in handy later on when we do factor by grouping, so that's a skill you should know. All right, and then example 5, we're going to factor again. And this one I like just because it has 3 terms, but you can still factor out a common term. So don't think it's just limited to just having 2 terms. All right, so we're going to have 25x squared y. We're going to have a negative 15xy, and then we're going to have 5y. So when we do that, we get 5 times x times y. And then here we're going to have a negative 3. Oops, let me clean that up, sorry. Okay. We have negative 3 times 5 times x times y. And then here we're going to have 5 times y. All right, so now let's circle what we have in common. So we know we have 5s, and then we know we have y's. Okay, and then what do you have left is you have what's circled. It's 5y times, the first one we have 5x squared, and then we have a minus 3x. Now keep in mind, we had 3 terms to start off with. So since everything's circled here, we're going to put a plus 1. You have to have a placeholder. You can't just drop it off, because if you were to multiply this back out, you won't get this and that 5y. This is probably why some people put the times 1 in there. Okay, just to make sure that they don't forget that you have to have something. And I'm okay with that. That doesn't hurt my feelings one way or the other. All right. And so we're going to end this podcast here. Again, this was just factoring using a greatest common factor. So we will move on to the next factoring method on the next one.